Hey guys, today I'm going to do a quick review on the Kuiu Mountain Star 2P tent. This tent is not super well known in Australia. It is an American company which primarily makes hunting equipment, but the tent that they make is it's quite good. I've used it on small trips in sort of Australia and New Zealand, but I've also had it at nearly 4,000 metres above sea level in a place called Kyrgyzstan. It is a 3-season tent. It did handle most of the conditions I've had it in without any real dramas at all. But I'll just quickly run through a few of the specs and then we'll get into how it performs a bit after, and then we'll take it outside and we'll set it up. So it's a, like I said, 2-person tent. It does have an external pole design, which is very handy for when you're setting it up if the weather's less than perfect, because you have the fly and the inner attached to each other. So when you bring it out of the bag, there's not setting up one and then covering it. You more or less just set it all up in one go, and the inner doesn't get wet. It is a fairly lightweight tent for the strength that you get out of it. It's advertised at 3 pounds, 3.3 ounces, which works out at about 1,455 grams, and that includes the poles, the pegs. Doesn't include the footprint or the gear loft, but you know, they're fairly minimal types of gear, so it doesn't list the weights on the website, but literally they weigh next to nothing. That was for the carbon pole option. If you do go the aluminium pole option, you know it's about a 1.5 ounce extra weight, so it's negligible. It still would have you around about the 1.5 kilo mark. The price difference between the carbon and aluminium is about $50 Australian, so your carbon pole option is $775, and you're looking about $725 for aluminium. So again, if you want the carbon poles, it's not a huge difference in price. So with the tent, you get obviously the tent, you get 10 pegs with guy ropes, you get a bag or a pouch that it all gets packed up in. If you do want the footprint, it is $80 Australian, and the gear loft, which suits all of their 2-person tents, is about $30 Australian. So, you know, depending on where you're setting it up, you may decide you don't want the footprint, but with the footprint there is the option to set it up as just a fly and floor, you know, to make it a bit lighter if you want to. I would always go with the inner option myself personally, and I do have the footprint as a bit of protection. It is a pretty expensive tent, so you do want to try to look after it, make it last a bit longer. It is a slightly asymmetrical design, so it is slightly tapered at the foot end. It is designed so when you sleep in it, you don't top and tail, you do sleep with your heads at one end. It probably helps a little bit with the wind shedding ability too by having it slightly tapered, and they do recommend you set it up a particular way if it is windy to help you know, try and stay out of the wind as much as you can. That being asymmetric, it is a bit of a, when I first got the footprint, I thought, oh, maybe they sent me the wrong one, but the footprint's asymmetric, matches the tub on the tent, so that's just one thing you gotta be a bit careful when you set it up for the first time. There is sitting room in the tent. It's about 1 metre roughly from the floor to the roof, so you know, average sort of height guy, I'm about 6 foot, so I have no dramas sitting up in the tent. It's fine, and I've been stuck in it for 2 days in sort of whiteout conditions, and you know, if there's 2 of you in there it might be a bit uncomfortable, but for one person it's more than roomy and you don't have any dramas with it. And like I've already covered, the external poles are really good for setting it up in bad weather, but the way that they cross over with the small crossover pole in the middle is a very strong design. And I set this up one night in Kyrgyzstan, about 3,500 metres above sea level. We set it up that night basically on dirt. When I woke up in the morning, there was about 0.5 metre of snow outside, and there was probably, I don't know, 150 mil thick sort of snow on the top of the tent, which is about 6 inches. So, you know, and that didn't bother the tent at all. The walls are fairly steep, so you don't really get anything building up on the walls, but obviously, like a lot of these tents, there is a bit of a flat section on the top, and a quick shake of the tent and that sort of all came off. But like I said, it didn't really affect the tent at all. It is it is designed as a 3-season tent. Some of the weather I experienced in Kyrgyzstan is probably pushing the 3 seasons just a little bit. Like I said, one night we set it up on gravel, and then the next morning there was half a metre-ish of snow on the ground. The following night, after we got moved from there, obviously in the big whiteout, we couldn't safely travel because you couldn't really see. But the next time that we set it up, it was basically icy snow, and we kicked the snow out of the way and then set the tent up, and it was more or less frozen ground that it got set up on. As far as the tent handling it, it did it okay. I'm sure if you had a 4-season tent with more of a wall and less mesh on the inner, it might be a little bit warmer. But when your water bottle's freezing in your tent overnight, a little bit of fabric is probably not going to help you too much as compared to, say, a better sleeping bag and a better mat. But the only time in those conditions where it struggled a little bit was when we had very powdery snow, and I was experiencing a little bit of snow blowing under the fly, and it was sticking on the mesh inner. And obviously if it got warm, whether from my body heat or breathing or whatever, it was dripping into the tent a little bit. It's not ideal. So the floor's obviously waterproof and it's going to pool up in there. So I jumped out of the tent and kicked a heap of snow up against the bottom of the fly to sort of seal it up and stop the wind blowing under there. Solved the problem. I didn't get wet. No more snow came in. Again, a lot of people, particularly in Australia, are probably not going to experience those sort of conditions. But obviously if you're travelling around, going to mountainous areas and things like that, if you're going to be encountering that sort of weather quite a lot, you probably want to look at a slightly more, 4-season oriented tent. But in terms of something that sort of does it all for most of our conditions in Australia and New Zealand, where I go a fair bit, this tent's really, I'm quite happy with it, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to anyone. With the loft and things like that, it's pretty simple. It's just got little toggles, just goes up on the inside of the tent. It doesn't really get in the way of your head or anything like that when you breathe, when you're sitting up in there. There is some pockets in the sides of the mesh inner, so if you do want to put your keys or a torch or something, it does keep it up out of the way. In terms of setting the tent up, the pole design is not a very typical design. There's not many tents that would have a design quite the same as this one. But that being said, one person can set it up without too much hassle at all. And there is a few extra features in the tent, like some vents with like a little prop, so you can open the vent and prop it open to help with your ventilation, try and cut down some condensation. Which, to be fair, this tent I never really experienced, and I've used it in quite a varied range of conditions, and like I said, it's not something I've really ever come across. The other big plus that this tent has is the dual vestibules. So it's got one on either side with zippered access into the tent from both sides. So if you're sharing it with your partner or your mate or something like that, you're not waking each other up in the middle of the night if you need to get up and go to the bathroom or something like that. But the two vestibules is good because you can put your boots and things like that in outside of out of the weather, so you're not waking up to boots that are a lot wetter than what they were in the morning if you get some rain. Like I said, it is an expensive tent. You will want to look after it, but for the conditions I've had it in, I would not hesitate to recommend it to anyone. It's held up really well. The build quality is good. And yeah, it is designed to be taken into places that are off the beaten track a little bit. It is designed for expedition type hunters, which don't really stick to the track. We're often way up in the bush doing our own thing, so it has to be built well. It has to be reliable, and that's all the things that this tent is. So we'll take it outside, I'll get it out of the bag and we'll set it up and let you guys have a look. So just a quick run through of what you get in the bag. Obviously you got the bag, you do get the tent pegs, come in a little bag, the poles also in their own bag, and then you get the tent body and the fly. This is the gear loft, like I said earlier, that's an optional extra, as well as the footprint or the protection from the bottom of the tent. Like I said earlier, there is about a 25cm taper on the tent, so that's something you do have to be aware of when you're setting it out, otherwise it won't go on there. But what I'll do now is I'll just peg the tent out and start setting it up, and then once it's all up we'll have a bit of a run through and I'll show you around. Righto, so there you have it. As you can see, it's pretty quick and easy to put up, even just for one person. It was a little fiddly trying to get the gear loft in. It's got little tight toggles, and because it's a really tight pitch on the tent, it's, you know, man fingers, it's not really that easy. But that's it pretty much set up. Now we'll just do a bit of a walk around, and I'll show you some of the other features. So this section here was the little fold out vents, or the propped open vents I was talking to you about. You'll see in there there's this little prop, and if you do want to open it up for ventilation, it's that simple. You just undo the Velcro, put the prop in there, and it holds it up. Now there's one at either end, so you can get a bit of cross flow ventilation. And then these extra guys, obviously if you're out setting it up, and especially if it was windy, you would use them. But you'll see here both of the little toggles on those glow in the dark. And it's pretty hard to see in the sun here, but all of these supplied guy ropes have a little bit of reflective woven through them as well, which for some people is probably not that big a deal, but if you're trying to find your tent in the dark, sometimes it makes all the difference. I didn't cover it earlier, but this tent, when I bought it, this was the only option for colours, the grey and the orange, but now they do a grey and like an olive green as well, so if you like the more subdued colours, they are available. You'll see here where the poles cross over, there is, you know, these clips. Some people probably would be a bit worried about them, but like I said, I've had it where the snow has been higher than this flat pole section at the top. You couldn't actually see the poles, so in terms of strength and how the tent performs, like it's exceeded my expectations. So now we're inside the tent. I won't be in here too long, it's a bit hot outside today, but I'll just show you a few of the other features on the inside. Obviously we've got the dual vestibules, one either side, that one there, and the one that I've just come through here. You'll see at the top here I do have the gear loft fitted in. It just fits in through these little toggles. Like I said, it is pretty tight up in there, but obviously once you put a little bit of weight, it you know, it's good though because it keeps it up out of your way. It's not hitting you in the head all the time. And then down at the other end here, that's the prop arrangement that I was showing you before. It does have a zipper there, so you don't have to get outside the tent to close that one up. If something starts blowing in there, you can just zip it up like that. And there is a matching one at the other end, so again, like I said earlier, you can get that ventilation flowing through both sides. The mesh is fairly fine, so you know, with midges and all the smaller insects, you don't really have much in the way of dramas. You can see here that the bathtub on it's pretty generous. It comes up about, I don't know, about 200 millimeters, maybe a little bit more. So you know, general rain and things like that, you don't have much trouble. You stay really dry. It's just if, like I said, your real powdery snow, if you don't have it pegged down super tight, you can get a little blowing in and sticking on the mesh. But like I said, it's not really a huge issue for us in Australia. And then there's your corner pockets. There's one of those in each corner. So again, if you need a little bit of extra storage, you can pop some gear in those and get it up off the floor. Earlier, there is instructions that tell you which way to set up the tent into the wind. It is printed on the tent, so even if you're 20,000 kilometres from home and you don't have the instructions or internet reception, it's written on there. It's pretty hard to stuff it up. We'll just have a bit of a walk around now, and you can have another look at the tent, and we'll pretty much wrap it up.